Hello and welcome to BrewingDaily.com. I'm your host, Matthew Winther, and this is the first in our series on how to brew all grain beer. Today we're going to talk about how to mash. So let's get started. Alright, let's take a minute and talk about some of the equipment that you're going to use. By far the most important equipment when mashing an all grain brew you're going to need that you haven't used before is going to be a mash tun. Now I've got a couple of different mash tuns here. The first one I have is a 5-gallon cooler, okay, and it has a copper sort of a manifold in there. I don't know if you can see in there. I'll pull it out. And all this is a copper coil that's been slitted on the bottom. Okay, and that's going to allow the grains to settle on top, and it's going to filter from the bottom out. It also has a little spigot on the front for, stopping and starting the flow of wort out of there. And the reason that we use coolers, now you don't have to use a cooler. You can use a brew kettle that's on the flame. But the whole point of mashing is we need to keep this at one solid temperature for at least an hour. Now I've seen mash times that go as long as 90 minutes. And one of these thick insulated coolers will actually, after 90 minutes, you've lost maybe 1 degree of temperature. So they're actually really good at insulating. I've also got a bigger one here, and this is a 5-gallon, this is a 10-gallon mash tun. And 10-gallon is by far superior. They're a lot harder to get 10-gallon coolers, and they're a lot more expensive. But with the 5-gallon mash tun, I think we figured out that you can only have about 12 pounds of grain before that thing is filled up to capacity, which is about 6% alcohol. So if you ever want to make a stronger beer than that, you're going to need a bigger mash tun. This is a 10-gallon mash tun, and what I've gotten here is a plastic PVC pipe manifold, okay, with a spigot on the front. Now these kind of spigots you can get at your home brew supply store. But that's the mash tun, and that's the most important piece of equipment that you're going to use. Now you'll also may want a hot liquor tank. And basically this is just another cooler. It doesn't have anything in it. It just has a little hose on the front to stop and start the flow of water, and it's just meant to hold hot water for when we're sparging, and we'll get to that later. And if you are lucky enough to have found one of these, they're pretty hard to find these days, but it's a sparger. I mean, basically it just spins, the water comes through, and it will sparge the grains with water. This is not necessary either. Some people will just do a batch sparge. This is called fly sparging. We'll get into the differences of that later as well. For the rest of the equipment you're going to need, we call this the outdoor equipment. You're going to need a very large propane burner, and that's this burner down here. And you're also going to need a large pot. This here is a 10-gallon stainless steel pot. You could go as low as an 8-gallon pot, but you're going to have about 7.5 gallons of wort when you finish mashing. And when it gets to a boil, you're going to have a little tiny bit of room for that boil over mess. So I recommend at least a 10-gallon pot. The other thing that you're going to need, and we're not really going to talk about today, is you're going to need a wort chiller. Okay, and that's going to be to cool your wort before the boil, and we'll get to that later. What I've got here is I got about 1.5 gallons of water, and I'm just heating this up, and it's not fancy water, it's not spring water, it's just tap water. We're just heating it up because we need to preheat our mash tun and our hot liquor tank. Right now these are at room temperature, and if we put our grains in and our water in, and it would cool it down. So we're going to preheat these first, and that's all we're doing. Okay, so this water is at about 107 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and just pour it in to my hot liquor tank and my mash tun. And then we're going to just put the lid on and let that sit and heat up while we start our mash. So I've got my mash water, and it's starting to heat up. I've got 12.5 quarts, which is a little over 3 gallons. Of mash water in here. Now, how did I come up with that number? Essentially, for every pound of grain that you use, you want to use about 1.25 quarts of water. So my recipe has 10 pounds of grain in it, so that's really easy. It's 12.5 quarts of water. I've also put in about a little less than a tablespoon of 5.2 pH stabilizer. Now what that's going to do is that's going to make the acidity in the water, the pH of the water, exactly 5.2. And that's right where we want to mash with. That's going to get us the best mashing results. The other thing that we have to talk about here is the temperature. So I want to mash at about 150 degrees. That's what this recipe calls for. The grains are room temperature. The mash tun is going to be preheated. So I'm gonna shoot for about 160 degrees, or maybe a little bit higher than 160 degrees because by the time I add my 10 pounds of grain in, I think it's going to get me to about 150 degrees. Now this is kind of a feeling process. If you're new to this, there are a lot of programs online that you can use that will calculate the water temperatures for you. Brew, there's a bunch online, so check those out. They'll tell you exactly how much water to add. They'll tell you exactly what temperature to get it to. Those programs are really good. The other thing I would talk about is the water quality. Now, an old friend used to tell me, garbage in, garbage out. So the better quality water you use in the mash here, the better quality beer you're going to produce. Definitely want to use something. Bottled spring water is great. A lot of people say not to use distilled water because it lacks the natural minerals that the fermentation likes. Probably want to stay away from too much tap water. So just a thought there. Okay, so our water's at about 161 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and pour it into the mash tun. Now remember, the mash tun has been preheated, so it won't cool down the water, but the grains will. Okay, now I'm going to just go ahead and add the grains in slowly while my assistant stirs. So we want to make sure that we don't have any lumps. We don't want any dough balls in there. We just want a nice good soup of grains and water. Okay, one quick check of the temperature, and we are right at 150, so that's pretty good. And so I'm going to just go ahead and put the lid right on there. Seal this up, and we're going to put this away for about an hour. And that's how long we're mashing this particular recipe for us, for 60 minutes. Okay, so I've got my sparge water started. I'm heating it up, and I'm going to heat it up to about 170 degrees. I've got about a little less than 5 gallons of water in here, and how do I come up with that number of 5 gallons, less than 5 gallons, and whatnot? Everyone's system is going to be different. Everyone's system is going to lose a different amount of water to grain absorption, to boiling, to racking your beers. You want to end up with about a 5-gallon batch, and so you're gonna have to plan accordingly. Now there are a lot of good websites and a lot of good programs out there that will give you numbers to start with, but you're going to have to iron it out yourself. Some of them might give you a little more than 5 gallons, some of them you might end up with less than 5 gallons. But you'll learn your equipment as you go. We've been mashing for about an hour, and I'm going to go ahead and take the lid off the mash tun here. And now we're going to vorloff. Now vorloffing is basically what we've got in here. We've got grains, we've got water, we've got kind of like a soup with the grains and the water floating around. Now what we want to do is we want those grains to compact on the bottom, and they're going to create a filter bed. Okay, and the way that we do this is we're going to run a small amount of the liquid off. Okay, not too fast. Okay, because if we do it too fast, the grains will clog up the little holes. Okay, so we're going to run it kind of slowly at first. A little faster than that, and we're going to do about probably 2 gallons worth. And as this starts to fill up, I'm going to stop it and pour it back in the top. And you'll see within the first half a gallon, you'll see a dramatic improvement in the clarity and the amount of chunks that are coming through this spigot. Okay, so we're about ready to sparge, and there's 2 kinds of sparging you can do typically. There's fly sparging, there's batch sparging. Now, if you have a hot liquor tank and you have a sparge arm, then you can fly sparge. If you don't have those things, then you can batch sparge. And that's what we're going to do right now. And what we're going to do is basically we're going to let all of the hot liquid drain out of here until it's just grains. Then we're going to take that hot water, that sparge water that we've heated up, and we're going to dump it into the mash tun, let all those grains settle down again. We're going to re-vorloff and then let that water drain out again. Okay, so it looks like we're just about done with the liquid that's in here, and you can see that it's just a bed of grains. I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to dump the whole rest of our sparge water right in there. Then we're just going to let that settle again, take about 10 minutes. We're going to re-vorloff, and then we're going to let all that drain out. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to re-vorloff. And it's actually still running, it's actually running pretty good right now, pretty clear. But we're gonna go ahead and run about a gallon of liquid through anyway. And since I can see that it's running pretty clear, I'm gonna go ahead and just let it run right back into the brew kettle, and then gently pour this back on top as not to disturb the grain bed again. Alright, so we finished our mash. We've got about 6.5 gallons of wort in this pot, and we're going to bring it up to a boil. But that's going to be the next section of our series. So come back to brewingdaily.com and check it out.